Good morning and thank you for joining me. This is Eric J. and we'll be discussing Federalist paper number 2. Um, this one is entitled Concerning the Dangers from Foreign Force and Influence, and it was written by John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, for the citizens of New York through the Independent Journal. This was essentially a celebration of the providential nature of the existence of our states in a country which greatly contributed to our own unity through geological features and shared turmoil, meaning the Revolutionary War, uh, which was calling for the citizens of New York and really anybody who is reading the journal to decide the question of if the Constitution is what is best for the nation and by extension for those citizens. Putting forth the consideration of the question is it in the best interest of the nation to remain united under one federal government or to divide into separate confederacies imbued with the same state powers that would have been placed in the national government? Now, just to reinforce, when it says confederacies, we're not talking about the South kind of thing here, but each confederacy is just uh, uh, a collaboration or a conglomeration of the different sovereign entities. In other words, several smaller groups of the states being brought together to form their own individual separate governments. The contention of the founding fathers with the Constitution was that instead of just simply separating themselves out, it would be better to remain unified. Ultimately, at this point, they were already unified under the Articles of Confederation, but they deemed that too weak of a document um, for true unity for the federal government, for the centralized government to really protect its populations. Um, it was considered until the great prospect of the ratification of the Constitution that the unity of a nation under central government was better for the prosperity of the American people overall. There were some individuals during this time who decided to promote a self-central view, meaning for those specific people that focused only on their power and influence. And there's a quote for that. But politicians now appear who insist that this opinion is erroneous, meaning the unity of the nation, and that instead of looking for safety and happiness in union, we ought to seek it in a division of the states into distinct confederacies or sovereignties. Now, obviously, the contention of the founding fathers is that this would be highly detrimental to the nation, especially with all of the shared values and the conflicts that they had already suffered through. Trying to dissolve into their own um, separate smaller governments was counterproductive to the unity of the nation and its overall prosperity. Um, Ultimately, even John Jay was acknowledging the providence, the focus of God bringing the people together in a general, this whole national situation. Um, Setting up the geological situation of the geographical situation of the nation at the time, um, the rivers that were running through everything, the commerce, the method of communication, all of this was just brought together. But so there's some quotes toward that end. Providence has in a particular blessing in a particular manner blessed with a variety of soils and productions, and watered it with innumerable streams for the delight and accommodation of its inhabitants. A succession of navigable waters forms a kind of chain around its borders, as if it binds it together, meaning the nation. While the most noble rivers in the world, running at convenient distances, present them with highways for that easy communication of friendly aids and the mutual transportation and exchange of their various commodities. So excellent for the economy of the largely agrarian societies, but obviously they had their industrial focuses as well. Continuing on further quotes, Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors. These were all largely British, originally British colonists. Like I said, they just barely threw off the government of King George. Um, Speaking the same language, professing the same religion, so Christianity. Again, this is reinforcing the providential, the God-given providence of the nature of this nation. Attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs, and who, by their joint counsels, arms, and efforts, fighting side by side through a long and bloody war, having nobly established general liberty and independence. And further quote is, it appears as if it was the design of Providence that an inheritance so proper and convenient for a band of brethren, like I said, he's acknowledging that the whole nation was brought together by this massive war and collective interest, united to each other by the strongest ties, should never split into a number of unsocial, jealous, and alien sovereignties. Now, this extra point in this quote will actually be addressed in future videos with regards to the other Federalist papers, where they acknowledge the possible conflict of competition between the different sovereignties, between different states. And in effect, they already felt that a little bit through the issues and the chaos wrought with the Articles of Confederation and the separate sovereignties of the states themselves, which created issues in terms of charging tariffs of trade in between the different states, as well as printing up their own money. But like I said, that'll be addressed in future videos. Finally, final quote, as a nation we have made peace and war. As a nation we have formed alliances, made treaties, and entered into various compacts and conventions with foreign states. Now at the time they're referring to their treaties with France and possibly even other foreign nations, as they try to really step out onto the world stage and make themselves known that this fledgling nation can stand on its own, can self-govern, and start getting on mutual defense treaties and trade treaties and whatnot with the nations that are already established. Um, the Federalist paper further goes into the reinforcement that the convention that was convened in Philadelphia to fix the articles found them, like I said, ineffective. So they, as a whole, as delegates of of all 13 respective states, went into creating the Constitution with no outside influence or personal passions, as the general membership of the delegates came together. Their focus wasn't on trying to just build up their own power, but really trying to focus on the direction of the nation, and just really trying to focus on the best way to protect the liberties of the citizens toward general prosperity. Um, they went to promote their love of country and promote the Constitution for the states to ratify. As a quote towards that is, admit, for so is the fact that this plan is only recommended, not imposed. These people, the delegates to this convention, were not acting as an oligarchy. They were acting as representatives of the people. They were not telling them you have to ratify this, but obviously they greatly endorsed ratification of this, so they are requesting of the general population to really put forward deliberation, to really consider and reason their way through this. But continuing on, it's only recommended, not imposed, yet let it be remembered that it is neither recommended to blind approbation, in other words, saying approval, or yet nor to blind reprobation or rejection, but to sedate and candid consideration by the people. So considering all aspects of the Constitution as written, so they can put it on their state legislatures to ratify the Constitution. Obviously it can be amended in the future, but for the people to look at the provisions of the Constitution and recognize that it is that it is within the national interest to protect the rights, the powers of the sovereign states within the prospective union, while reinforcing a collective protection of the rights of not only commerce but from foreign invasion from outside influence. But they also needed to recognize, returning back to acknowledging that there are those still who were placing selfish influence and with possible connections to foreign powers. They're placing that level of influence over the unity of the connected people of the nation. They were doing this by putting out pamphlets trying to denigrate and try to downplay the effectiveness of the Constitution and the unity of the separate states into a collective nation. As a quote toward that is, not only many of the officers of governments who obeyed the dictates of personal interest, but others from mistaken estimate of consequences or the undue influence of foreign attachments, which, like I said, could be connections to foreign powers. Several of these people, several of these citizens, these government officers probably still had connections back in England, which were speaking into their ear to try to reduce the effectiveness of the unity of the nation and try to keep it as disjointed as possible so as to allow for outside influences to really speak into the nation to reinforce their own influence. But continuing with the quote, it says, or those whose ambition aimed at objects which did not correspond with the public good were indefatigable or not tiring in their efforts to persuade the people to reject the advice of that patriotic Congress. And unfortunately, obviously, that was happening. Uh, pursuing forward, that although many were deceived by these people who were passing out these pamphlets, the vast majority of people were not. They were putting forward a great deal of deliberation of the different parts of the proposed Constitution in real reason and just general consideration, general discussion. Um, and it goes on to further reinforce the fact that those people who were at the convention were appointed to the convention. They were wise and experienced, and as they were chosen from their respective state. Quoting reinforcement in there is that they were individually interested in the public liberty and prosperity. Therefore, it was not less their inclination than their duty to recommend only such measures as, for the most mature deliberation, they really thought prudent and advisable. So in this convention, they were just putting forward only those very specific needs in terms of laws and protections. Their goal was not to impose massive, the kind of thing we have now, where we have massive overburdening laws on any state of view. Well, that was not their intent. Just to promote the best form of national prosperity, national protection from outside influence, and just allow for the individual citizen to be able to self-govern as they knew that they best could. It was reinforcing that the convention only had the public good in mind, its direction, and its future, in directing the course of the nation through the Constitution. And they were reinforcing the need for that it's best for the nation to remain united as one, and not give in to disillusion under common value, under common principle, not just to keep it together for its own sake, but because it would be the best possible opportunity for the citizenry itself. Reinforcing in this final quotes that we're going to, which is that certainly would be the case, and I certainly wish, speaking of John Jay, that it may be as clearly foreseen by every good citizen that whenever the dissolution of the Union arrives, America will have reason to exclaim in the words of the poet, "Farewell, a long farewell to all my greatness," referring to the fact that obviously the dissolution of the Union would also lead to the complete abandonment of the greatness of the nation itself. Well, thank you for joining me in analyzing the Federalist paper number 2. Look forward to you joining me as we continue on throughout the rest of these videos. I'm going to be including a link to a book of the Federalist Papers down below. Um, it's from the website of Institute for Principal Studies. Very good think tank, an excellent resource for anybody who's looking to further study this topic as well as other similar topics. And I'll only ask that you do yourself a favor, you do me a favor, and you subscribe and share this video with your friends to be able to share the considerable knowledge we're going to be going through and be able to continue on with the conversation. Go ahead and like or dislike as you wish. All is fine, and constructive criticism and shared interest in this knowledge. Thank you, and have a good day, and God bless.